meeting is being recorded.
All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks very much for joining us this evening at this collaborative programming between Overture Center for the Arts and the Nelson Institute. I'm Beth Rossett. I direct the galleries at Overture, and Overture is very proud to partner with Nelson Institute in this year of the environment programming and honoring the 50th anniversary of the Earth Day, founding of Earth Day at the Nelson Institute. This program, Clear Cut, The Wages of Dominion, accompanies John Riggs' exhibit at Overture. And Overture's entire spring cycle of exhibits are all about the environment and humans' relationship to the natural and animal world. Exhibits are now online, and you can see all of the art in in an exhibition format online. And you can find the links in the chat room to Overture Galleries and the Nelson Institute, and links also to John Riggs' website and Monica Shea's website, who will be presenting this evening. And with us this evening on this web program is Emily Reynolds, the Assistant Director of Community Engagement and Alumni Relations for the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. And we have Monica Shea and John Riggs. And Monica Shea is going to talk first, so I'm going to introduce her right now. And if you could save your questions, or you can go ahead and put your questions into the Q&A section of the, there's a Q&A on the WebEx program, and go ahead and write your questions in there. And and then we'll save the questions until the end after both Monica and John have presented. So Monica Shea is a PhD candidate in the Department of Forest and Wildlife Ecology at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Monica's background is diverse. She has studied birds and forest communities, agroecology, historical vegetation patterns. She is broadly interested in landscape ecology, which encapsulates many subdisciplines. As an ecologist, she intends to shed light on some of the complexities of the changing landscapes and scientifically inform conservation. And for her PhD, she is studying the multi-scale drivers that have influenced vegetation patterns in Wisconsin's tension zone. And please welcome Monica Shea. And again, her website is in the chat room. And take it away, Monica.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Emily, also for helping get this webinar up and running. And thanks for everyone for coming. When this event was, potentially faced the challenge of being canceled, they both stepped up and made sure that we could stream it online, and I'm already seeing several of my friends who are all across the country watching, so this opportunity is giving us increased accessibility to this programming, so that's great. I'd also like to thank David Mladenoff, who is my advisor at UW-Madison. He is an expert in historical forests of Wisconsin and has studied forest change in this region, and I'm using some of his slides at the end of this talk. I'd also like to thank John Riggs. So when this all started, we didn't know each other, but we sat down and had a couple of conversations, and they were really great conversations, and talked about how we wanted this to all go. And we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that we talked about a lot was the importance of combining the art with the science. And, as a scientist, it can be challenging to get ideas across in a way that makes people feel something and take action. On the other side, art is a great way to get people to feel something, but maybe doesn't have all the information and stuff that science has with it. So combining the two is a wonderful way to combine, information with the stuff that makes you feel, to hopefully provoke action among people. So we hope that we're going to start to attempt to do something like that today. This is kind of an experiment because neither of us have done anything like this before, but we're pretty excited. So I'm going to start out talking really generally about forests and specifically about old growth forests and how they've changed in the Pacific Northwest and in Wisconsin. So this map right here is a map of the forests of the world. You can see there's forests covering much of the world. It's about 30% of
Monica?
the land area. Oh, yep.
I think you need to share your PowerPoint.
Oh, I haven't done it yet. Oh, I do have it up on my screen. Thanks for checking.
That's okay.
There we go. This is the map of the world. You can see that it covers much of the area. It's about 30% of the land area. Forests are really important to global functioning of the Earth, global health, and they perform really unique functions compared to other types of ecosystems. So this figure is showing was put together by the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. It was a group of scientists who met at the turn of this century to sort of categorize the different functions and values that forests provide to the world. So historically, we often think about forests in terms of their resource use. So using them in terms of producing wood for building things, as well as pulp for things like toilet paper, which we all really need right now, and other products. And more recently, we've started to recognize some of the other values that forests have in the world, including things like preserving biodiversity. A really important one is regulating climate. So, you know, trees are plants, and so they photosynthesize and they take carbon from the atmosphere and turn that carbon into plant material. Trees are woody plants, and so they store that carbon, that plant material, for a really long time. And so we know that that forests are really important to the global carbon system. There's other ecological services that forests provide, such as preventing or reducing pollution into waterways, as well as helping to prevent erosion. Forests also provide social services such as recreation and supporting local economies through ecotourism, and then really important cultural and spiritual values we know forests have. So forests all across the world, they really vary quite a bit in the services that they provide. And this depends a lot on things like the climate of the region, soils, what different species of trees are growing there, what types of forests they're growing in, and what other types of land cover and people are in that area. So I'm going to just focus on a couple of these places and save the rest for another time. So I'm going to start out with the Pacific Northwest and old growth forests in the Pacific Northwest. So if you've been lucky enough to be in an old growth forest, you know that they are really special places. There's just something really special and distinct about them when you're in them. But what is it about old growth forests that make them special? Well, scientists think about old growth forests in terms of their structure. That's really how we like to define old growth forests. So there's 4 different components of structure that make an old growth forest an old growth forest. The first one is sort of the obvious one. It's having large old trees dominating the canopy. So, you know, these are the trees at the top of the canopy. They're big, they're old. They are sort of the things that we think of when we think of old growth. But the second aspect of structure is what's beneath the canopy. There's multiple layers of trees, younger, smaller trees that are growing beneath those large old trees. And those really provide really important vertical structure in these forests. The third aspect of structure is snags. These are standing dead trees, and these are important for a number of organisms, providing habitat and food. The third component of structure that's important is coarse woody debris. That's any woody debris that's lying on the floor. That can be dead trees that have fallen over, dead branches that have landed on the forest floor. And again, these provide really important and different structure than those other aspects of structure. Together, these 4 aspects are what make old growth forests, and what make them function from other younger forests that may not have all of those aspects of the structure. And so these different aspects of structure allow old growth forests to be home to a number of wildlife species. And there's several examples of these. I'll just talk about a few of them. So the first one there is kind of the quintessential spotted owl. This is a bird that really relies on having large areas of mature old growth forest for habitat and for feeding. There's also another bird that I'd like to talk about, which is the marbled murrelet that's down there on the bottom, that black and white illustration. The marbled murrelet is a seabird. It actually spends most of its life out at sea, but for nesting, it flies inland, sometimes up to 30 kilometers, to find these really specific nesting spots in old growth forests. There's also a number of mammals that rely on the old growth forest. So the two that I have here, I have the red tree vole and the northern flying squirrel. Both of these organisms depend on having mature old growth forests and preferably larger continuous tracts. The red tree vole can spend its entire life, multiple generations, up in the canopy of trees. And also the forest floor is really important for supporting things like amphibians. The picture I have there is of a salamander. There's several different species of salamander that depend on old growth forests. And this is just a snapshot of all the different organisms that depend on old growth forests. There's other birds, other mammals, other amphibians, there's invertebrates, there's a bunch of plants that are specialists, as well as microorganisms. So altogether, these organisms combine to create a old growth forest community that's really unique in the region. Other services that these forests provide are things like stream protection. So the trees provide shade, which cools the water of the stream and is really important for fish. Trees that die also will fall into the stream, and that structure in the stream that's added to the stream can provide habitat for invertebrates, fish, and a whole host of organisms. In general, forests provide really important bank stabilization. They can prevent runoff and erosion into streams, and so they're very important for maintaining stream quality. A really important one is the old growth forest role in the carbon cycle. Old growth forests are very big, important carbon pools. A pool is a place where carbon is stored. Carbon is stored in these old growth forests in a number of places, including in the huge trees that have been growing for hundreds of years. They're also stored in all the other trees that are distributed throughout the canopy. They're in the snags, in the coarse woody debris, which, although they're dead and decomposing, they decompose rather slowly. And then there's also carbon stored beneath the surface of the forest, in the soil and in the roots and in the organisms that live in the soil. And we know that these old growth forests are huge carbon pools and very important for storing our carbon. So the question is, what has been lost? And it's actually hard to know the amount of old growth forest that has been lost in the Pacific Northwest, but we know that a lot of it was cut down during the logging era in the early part of the 20th century. So part of the reason why we don't know how much has been cut down is because we don't know how much there was prior to European American settlement. We know that there wasn't 100% of the landscape covered by old growth forests. There was a mixture of different ages and types of forests across the whole landscape. But we can estimate that roughly, depending on where you are, 10 to maybe 50% of the original old growth forest remains today. And so, whatever number it is, it's a lot that has been lost. And so thinking about what's been lost, we can also think about the different services and values of these old growth forests that have also been lost. And, the biggest one that you all have probably heard the most about is the spotted owl, the decline in the spotted owl. And that people noticing that is what led to efforts to help slow the rate of cutting in old growth forest. All right, now I'm going to transition to talking about forests in Wisconsin. And here I have a little bit more detail about how forests have changed over time. This is work that has been done in my lab for a number of years. So what these figures are showing, I'll start with this figure on the right. This is a map of sort of the structure of land cover across Wisconsin at the time of European American settlement, right before the landscape was settled by European Americans. So these colors are showing in the green where there is forest, and then in the more brown colors where there were more open landscapes like prairie and savanna. So northern Wisconsin, you can see, was mostly forested. There are a few patches of open landscapes in the barrens and things like that. Southern Wisconsin, on the other hand, was mostly savanna and prairie with patches of forest in a couple of different places. So focusing on northern Wisconsin, on this figure on the left, that's showing basically the dominant species in different parts of the landscape. And so the yellow color is white pine, which is a common old growth species. And it occurred throughout much of Wisconsin. It wasn't really confined to one particular area. Also, cue in on the green colors up there. That will be things like hemlock, sugar maple, and yellow birch, which also formed really large tracts of old forest in northern Wisconsin. So when Wisconsin was settled, people quickly went up north, settled by European Americans. People went up north and they really saw the potential of those forests for cutting and providing lumber to the expanding West. And so they quickly started cutting down the trees. They targeted white pine, which was a big tree. It was valuable at the time, and it often grew near rivers. And so they'd cut it down and they would float it downriver. And this figure is, or this illustration is showing a log jam that happened in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, in 1869. So as early as 1869, there were this many trees being cut down. This continued for the rest of the 1800s and into the early 1900s. The peak of logging happened sort of at the end of the 19th century. And this figure is showing, in addition to how much was cut, is it's showing the different species and how they were cut over time. So you can see that light purple is pine. That one was targeted right away, and much of it was cut down. Once pine started to dwindle on the landscape, loggers started to focus on things like hemlock, which was important for tanning at the time, and then also the hardwoods. And as time went, you got fewer and fewer trees left on the landscape, and eventually the landscape in northern Wisconsin they're trying to convert it to agriculture. And so you saw the loss of logging and the conversion to agriculture. So we know a little bit more how the forest has changed since that time based on different data sets that we've worked on in our lab. I'm going to talk about 3 specific species and show their changes over time. Okay, so I'm going to start with eastern white pine. Like I said, this one was the targeted tree for logging at the early part of the logging era. Okay, so this map is showing different ecoregions, the relative dominance of white pine. So you can see, like I said before, white pine was kind of everywhere in the north. It was never the dominant tree, but it was pretty common all across much of the north in the mid 1800s prior to the cutover. The next figure is going to show the after the cutover during peak agriculture in the 1930s. You can see that white pine has dwindled quite a bit. It is not very common on the landscape anymore, probably in little patches here and there. And the last panel is 2000s. You can see that white pine is starting to come back in certain places, but it is nowhere near where it was prior to European American settlement. Next is eastern hemlock. So this one was targeted after white pine for tannery purposes. So prior to European American settlement, It was also really important in the north, particularly in that central region where you had really rich soils that supported a good hemlock growth. After the cutover, you saw great declines, especially in that central region, but they weren't quite wiped out like white pine was. And then in the 2000s, you see basically continuing decline of eastern hemlock, and you're not really starting to see that recovery that we're starting to see with white pine. The last one is aspen. So aspen, also kind of like white pine, was kind of widespread, not as common as white pine prior to European American settlement, but it was in a lot of places. After the cutover, boom, it exploded. Aspen is an early successional species. It likes to take advantage of the open conditions that were created by the cutover, as well as fires that followed the cutting, and it just really took over. And then what's happening in the 2000s, we see it's declined a little bit in some places, but it's still very common, and it's expanded a bit into the south as well. These maps are showing the change in tree size over time. So these pictures on the top is showing small diameter size classes, so the relative number of trees in small size classes. These are, in the middle is the medium sized classes, and then the bottom is the large trees. The maps on the left, these ones are in the mid-1800s prior to European American settlement. You can see that there's kind of a range of size classes, mostly in this middle size class, but you have some in the big, some in the small. Once you get to after the cutover, most of the trees are in the small size class. And then after the cutover, you can see that you're starting to get some growth in this middle size class, but you still don't really have as many in that large size class. And basically what this means is that we have lost the old growth forest in Wisconsin. And it has been calculated that about 0.2% of the forest in Wisconsin are old growth. That's not very much. We don't know exactly how much there was before, but based on this map right here, and these range of diameter classes, we can expect that there was a fairly decent amount of old growth forests. And so what does that mean? What does the loss of the old growth forest mean in Wisconsin? Well, it doesn't have the same suite of species that we see in the Pacific Northwest, but there still are some species that rely on this old growth forest structure, as well as ecosystem processes like, the carbon cycling that I talked about, nutrient cycling. That's very unique to old growth forest in Wisconsin. And so the loss of that has really been a loss of these functions on the landscape. So I'm going to leave you with this as we go into John's talk. And as you listen to his reflection, I want you to think about sort of what used to be here, what has changed, and what has been lost over time, but also think about steps that might be taken to mitigate these problems. And so with that, I'll leave you with John, and I'll take questions after that.
Thank you, Monica. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much. That was very interesting. John, I'm going to introduce John Riggs. He is a Madison-based photographer who moved to Seattle area about 6 years ago, where he was deeply moved by the 12,000-year-old old growth forest in the Olympic National Park. In 2016, John created an exhibit called Entering Old Growth, Meditations from the Ancient Rainforest of the Pacific Northwest. In this series, he depicted the life forces of these ancient forests. During this time, he also experienced and was observing the grief and the destruction of these old growth forests, and was very moved and disturbed by seeing this so up close and the scale of devastation. And so this clear-cut exhibit that's the clear-cut exhibit now up, it depicts this destruction of the old growth. And the exhibit is also a metaphor for the human and planetary condition we find ourselves in today. And John, I'll mention John also has a book to accompany this exhibit, and you can see this project on Overture's website, part of it on Overture's, and then the entire project he has on his own website. And that's, you can find that in the chat room. Okay, and remember to save your questions, and you can go ahead and type them into the Q&A section, and after John's presentation, we'll have some time for questions and answers. Okay, thank you. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Beth. Hello, can everybody hear me?
We can, but we can't see you. If you want to turn your camera on.
Oh. How's that? Can you see me now?
Yep, now we can.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really happy so many of you have joined us today. You know, it's sad that the exhibitions, we got the one hung in the Overture Center, and 3 days later, the doors were locked. We didn't get the other portion of the exhibit hung in the main gallery of the Memorial Union, but the prints are all safe in their basement, and hopefully someday it might be rescheduled. We'll see about that. Anyway, thank you, Monica. That was wonderful. I hope someday soon, if I ever get a chance to be back in Madison, we can continue our conversations. Science to me is it's something I can't do, but I value it very highly because it presents the data. It's the people looking at the granular detail of the physical reality. I just see spirit. When I walk in the big forest, I don't think too much about species. I can't name the trees. I can't name the plants, the birds, all this stuff that scientists really look hard at and come to understand. And I value that highly. It's just not who I am. And thank you, Emily, for making this happen. I appreciate that we are celebrating Earth Day a little bit early, but all of these events are helping the Nelson Center to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So, welcome everyone to this. I would use the word spectacular, but that seems strange. To this time out that we have been put in by our very dearest Mother Nature, who has decided that there's a course correction needed in our behavior, so she shut us down. She inserted a little tiny virus into our ecosystem, into our bodies. And look, the entire machine that we've built that creates our culture, our civilization, all our art, our science, our luxuries, our wealth, has come grinding to a halt, everything except the essentials. And so in this time out that we're in, I would hope that we can make good use of it. And I see it in spite of all the suffering, the dying, we've all made sacrifices. We're all making sacrifices. I've sacrificed the exhibitions, but that sacrifice is minor compared to what so many people are undergoing right now. I certainly have a lot of compassion for that. However, I would like us to choose to see if we can't put this time out to good use. And what I have to offer this evening is an attempt to do that. I believe this time out is giving us an opportunity to stop, to examine just what we have done, our behavior, who we have become as a species, and where we might go with that information. And to that end, I've prepared a video specifically for this occasion, which I want very much to share with you, and I'm eager and really excited to do that. What you will see in this video is a slideshow of all 57 images that constitute the exhibition, Clear Cut, The Wages of Dominion. Beth's gallery, the Overture Center, and the main gallery of the Memorial Union cooperated in hosting this exhibition. And all we have left of it now is what we have at this moment. course, that's all we ever have, isn't it? It's just this moment. So you will see the 57 inches, which constitute the clear-cut show. 2/3 of these images are shot entirely in the clear-cut that surrounds the Olympic National Park on the Olympic Peninsula. And those I've presented and mounted and hung entirely in black and white. The subject is grim, but I believe there's a lot of beauty to be found in truth, and sometimes truth is grim. But to lighten the mood a bit and to provide contrast to what now is, I've interspersed some of the full color images that I shot in the old growth of the Peninsula State Park and presented in an exhibition entitled Entering Old Growth, Meditations from the Ancient Rainforest of the Pacific Northwest. I hung that show in Tamarack Gallery in November and December of 2016, immediately prior to starting my work on the clear cut. So you'll see the black and white images interspersed with the color images. What you will hear in this video is a highly condensed version of a guided meditation that I wrote. I call it a guided meditation. It's guided meditation / essay / prose poem / rant. Some of my friends say / sermon, but understand it is sermon to self, not to you. So it's a highly condensed version of a longer version of the full essay, which is on my website, if anybody is interested. And under the words, we've inserted some of the, what I call water music. One of my favorite things to do while hiking in old growth is stop by one of the thousands of these little rivulets that come roaring down the mountain and sit on a rock or a log and just listen to the sound of the water moving. And I started making recordings of this while I would sit in meditation. And so I've inserted some of that footage underneath the words. So with that, I want to keep this part short, but I want to save the time to do this meditation. So let's begin. Any of you who are regular meditators, I invite you to assume a meditative posture, whatever you choose. But in any case, everybody else, I would invite you to sit back and relax. Allow the words to flow through you like water. Allow the images that you see across your screen, allow them to evoke whatever sensations, whatever feelings that may arise without censorship. Just allow. So I invite you all to now go within, step inside yourself, and accept this offering. Now, if I can find the file, I will start it. Here we go. Clear cut. The wages of dominion.
Oh, John, I think it's not showing.
First thing to happen in clear cut. After the burly, big-hearted men. It's not showing?
Nope.
Okay, let me try this way. Okay, I've got this file here. Here we go. Try this. Clear cut. The wages of dominion.
Still not showing.
Still not showing. What's the problem, Emily, do you think?
I don't know. We practiced it.
Oh, I know what it is. I know. I'm so sorry. Sorry, folks. I'm brand new at this. Here we go.
There we go. Perfect.
Clear cut. After the burly, big-hearted men with chainsaws leave. After the last logging truck is loaded and heading down the mountain. After animal has fled and bird has flown. The first thing to happen, even before departing spirit takes refuge in our unconscious, and the great silence of buried shame settles like morning frost over the violated land. The first thing to happen, if you are lucky enough to be present in such a moment, is a faint glimmer of recognition, a recognition of complicity. As the early morning mists rise out of clear cut to rejoin the sky, the scene resembles a battlefield littered with body parts, blood, and the bilious spilling innards of steaming corpses. Hollow-eyed soldiers scavenging among those smoking ruins. Dark visions of apocalypse arise in the mind. In this vast silence, in the abrupt and total absence of an ecosystem 12,000 years in the making, but only a day in the taking, in this dramatic example of dominion, and in the emptiness in the pit of my stomach, I sense, vaguely at first, that I too am somehow responsible, that I can no longer stand apart in moral rectitude and blame others for this ecocide. In the face of such brutal evidence, a question worms its way through my crumbling denial. What exactly is my role in all this? What is my role? Join me, if you will, in this place. Climb up and sit with me on this stump, which until yesterday was a towering western red cedar growing in place for 1,600 years. A full 16 feet across. We could square dance up here. Sap still oozes from its cambium like a congealing scream. We are high on a shorn, naked mountain in the middle of the Olympic Range. 20-some miles to the west rolls the great Pacific onto the sands of Claylock Beach. 20-some miles to the east rises the Mount Olympus Ridge, almost totally devoid now of its 12,000-year-old glacial caps. To the north and to the south, we look out over great valleys once covered by ancient forest, now converted into a patchwork quilt of tree farm and clear cut. Periodically a raven's call echoes mournfully up the canyon walls, intimate, speaking directly to us in an ancient language only the heart can understand. An ancient language only the heart can understand. Breathe in the intense, heady aroma as the cedar mingles with the fumes of compacted mud giving up its fetid oxygen. Bereft of life, we are now alone. Let the tension in your shoulders be swept away by the wind off the ocean. Relax your jaw and suspend your disbelief. But stay alert to the wind luffing in your ears, for sometimes it carries messages. Fill your lungs with this sweet crystalline air and remember who you are. Remember who you are. This ancient, absent cedar has a message for us, but its voice is as soft as a ghost, as gentle as a lover, and achieves its authority only in our stillness, in our ability to be attentive to its meaning. If we love life, our life and all life, and if we wish to discover a source of hope, it is important to know who we as a species have become. To know that, we must look clear-eyed at what we have done, and further, how we personally benefit now, today, from that behavior. I want to tell myself, But I didn't wield the chainsaws. I didn't own the land or the extraction companies pocketing the immense profits. But that doesn't mean I don't benefit from those who did. Just because I don't own any slaves, or because it was my ancestors, not me, who fought the wars, stole the land, dispossessed the natives, and plundered the resources of the planet, does not mean I haven't benefited in every way from those who did, and continue to benefit every minute of every day that I am alive. It does not absolve me from responsibility. It does not absolve me from responsibility. From this stump, we can look out over our broader cultural landscape and through a clarified lens, examine how the current state of our politics, our economics, our science, even our families and love lives have become infected and sickened by the very same mindset of dominion that justifies this clear cut. From this overlook, too, we can re-examine some of the old stories we have told ourselves. One of those stories reads in my book, "And God blessed them and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and every creature that crawls upon the earth." Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over every creature that crawls upon the earth. This is what we have done. This is who we as a species have become. I am this too. We share a history with an overarching plot line drenched in the monstrous lie of dominion. A history that continues today as if it all belongs to us, not vice versa. A lie that it is all here to serve us, not vice versa. A lie that it is all ours for the taking. Ours for the taking. Have at it. Dominion has made me what I am. Despite my modest attempts at greener personal behavior and a reduced carbon footprint, still, I live a lifestyle in a culture created by and defined by species hegemony. This ancient, absent cedar shows me how this very drive for supremacy has separated us from our source, has separated us from our tree brethren, from our animal allies, from the bird angels whose heart-wrenching calls fade from hearing, and from the root microbes that digest our food for us in our guts, has separated us from ourselves, and finally, from spirit. Thus, separated and alone, buttressed by the illusion of technological and scientific prowess, we awaken to face Endgame. Endgame, king of the hill, as the hill crumbles beneath us and our legs turn viscous. If there is any hope at all, it is no longer them who must be held responsible, or even we. It is I. We are not bad people. Unless determined to follow the old storyline and burn in a mythical eternal hell, guilt is not a terminal condition. Rather, guilt is an omen sent directly from our Mother Earth herself, informing us of a needed course correction, calling us to wake up. Our world is on fire. The story of my generation has been the story of our response to that wake-up call, of coming into awareness of the lie of entitlement working in our lives and the ever so painful attempt at extrication therefrom. Fortunately, guilt and blame are but way stations in this meditation, not the destination. We press on. The unmistakable message from Clear Cut is that the evolution of human consciousness must continue beyond dominion into communion. If we are to continue receiving the gift of life and passing that gift along to our children and our grandchildren. Well, what does that mean? And how do we do it? There is some more work that needs to be done. If we persevere, we discover another possible response to the unease of complicity that reveals itself to the steadfast. That response is remorse. Stay with me here. When I stop blaming everyone else, the greedy capitalists, the politicians who enable them, the 1%, when I take full ownership of what I have done and who I have become, a small chemical valve opens within. Instantly, a powerful dose of contrition seeps into my emotional body like an injection of pure spirit, occupying the space so long held by loathing, denial, guilt, shame. Contrition is an elixir, initiating a nuclear surge of irrepressible life force rising in our central nervous system, barely detectable at first, but gaining strength as we nourish it and come to cherish its presence. It is the very force that converts a seed into a sprout, that can raise sap 300 feet from the roots to the topmost needle of this very cedar. The same force that joins a bee to its swarm in search of nectar. Spirit arouses. As I am overwhelmed with sorrow for all that has been lost, for the ancient technologies we suppressed, for the age of extinctions we have now caused, for the irreparable harm we have inflicted on the planet, its oceans and its life systems, its atmosphere, and for all the wrong in which I have been complicit. An old and familiar sense of separation begins to loosen its grasp within me. Fear relaxes its grip a bit. My lofty perch of judgment becomes uncomfortable. And over time, I awaken into being part of, rather than above or better than everything and everyone that is not me. I catch a glimpse of the swarm, and I feel the impulse to move with it. This may be a subtle thing, indeed, but it is no small thing. This is not a mere difference in degree, but, I would assert, a fundamental next step in the evolution of consciousness. For I can now begin the descent from my lofty perch of judgment on high and rejoin my species. After such a long exile, I can now step back into the circle dance of life celebrating itself and become the glowing, living, breathing manifestation of life itself that I am. Finally, after all these eons, I can step back into myself. Just imagine. Isolation, alienation, separation, like the morning mists in Clear Cut, simply evaporate. The same breath of life that animates every worm and every whale and every leaf on every tree floods in to animate me. And you? Breathe it in deeply Remember who you are. Remember who you are. Spirit revives. She arises to sing again, to dance again. What a tragedy it would be to allow such miracles of creation as you and me to numb out on a soulless desert of despair, to ultimately devolve into radioactive dirt. The visceral acceptance of the truth of my complicity in uniting me in the confederacy of my fellows, in reuniting me with the league of life itself on earth, is the necessary preparation for what follows. For it is only the depth of my contrition that finally and for all time blows away the denial, the confusion, and the doubt clouding my mind. In so doing, it clears a passageway forward to clarity in my identity, the capacity for connection, for compassion, and ultimately forgiveness. My tears bathe my soul body with love and cleanse my mind of fear, preparing me for action. Preparing me for action. Now, if becoming human has meant life becoming aware of itself, and with that awareness, we have been lured by our own projection of God down a path of dominion, and as a result of that dominion, we have become separated from what we have become conscious of, for God's sakes, can we not recognize the error of our ways? Forgive ourselves our complicity, and reassume our place as equals with the salamanders and the cedars, with all of life. This passage out of denial and blame and into the lucid realm of remorse and forgiveness is the most powerful generator. Lucidity is a clairvoyant state of communion with spirit, setting the stage for atonement and reparations, generating the resolve, the strength, the wisdom, and the energy required to set foot on the path of making things right. With high hopes, no less, and in the highest of spirits. Do not underestimate the enormity or the difficulty of this shift. Please do not underestimate its importance. Having forgiven ourselves and each other, and as members of a learning planet, we now set about the process of relinquishing our entitlement and taking up our rightful place in a biosphere in which all species have their just and essential roles in an evolving symbiotic system. A system imperfectly designed, but still hard at work to better sustain the needs of all species. We join with those prophets who came before us, and with our heroic fellows, pioneers already on the path of making things right, and dedicate our lives to the reparation of everything that lies broken at our feet. Everything that lies broken. The path of making things right. Imagine what that might look like for yourself, for us as a country, for us as a species. We have frequently achieved what was once unimaginable, but then we imagined it, and it was made manifest. Think only of the atomic bomb, walking on the moon, abolition. Think of women's suffrage, penicillin, gay marriage. Outside of the sun, the human imagination is the most powerful force on earth. Imagine now the possibility of 1,000 other such things we have the potential to manifest in our pursuit of reparations on the path of making things right. How about a fusion jet engine for starters? From something to nothing. In the blink of a geological eye, there is a zone of transition as vast as our imagination in between. It can pass unnoticed, hidden from view, or it can transform our planet. We can wake up, or we can die out. We can wake up, or we can die out. It is precisely the vastness, the suddenness, and yes, the horror of that transition that has the power to shock us out of our old stories and our old habits of thought and being. It is within that zone of transition, in clear cut, where we can first experience, then bear witness to the possibilities inherent in emptiness. If a little fear is required to get our attention, maybe a little horror is required to act. Stay with it. Watch where dominion is in play. And when we discover it at work in ourselves, we simply do something a little differently. Watch what happens. Repeat. Witness the miracle of evolution at work. And when we discover it coming at us from others, we simply turn sideways to it and watch it pass. We do not further empower it with battle. Rather, giving it no energy, we swarm around it and get on with our business on the path. We immerse ourselves in the transition moment, wherever and whenever we find it. Life is full of them. And for the sake of our children and grandchildren, we hold it close to our hearts and ride that moment like the dragon of survival that it is. Let us swarm. Let us swarm. Thank you for listening. This is John. Clear cut.
Hey, everyone. Thank you very much, John. That was very moving. And it's really something to see the pictures of the destruction next to the images of just the life force and the incredible integrity of those forests. Unfortunately, we don't have very much time left. Maybe a time for one question. One question is, what do you see as the tools for spurring this evolution of human consciousness that you address so much in your essay there?
What do I see the tools to use?
Tools, yeah.
I see the main tool is as I guess I stated in the meditation, going within and discovering our role in dominion, so that we can do what we need to do to forgive ourselves, quit blaming everybody else, get over our denial of our own internal participation in a modern culture and the engine that's creating the destruction, and forgive ourselves for all that. And that in itself generates the energy and the power and the wisdom and the spirit, frankly, that we need to evolve to that place of where we're functioning out of a sense of communion, rather than dominating each other and dominating life itself. This impulse to dominate is what I have come to understand by my time in Clear Cut is the fundamental source of our problem. So to get over that domination has been a lifelong struggle in many of us that I know, myself included, in various levels of awareness. So becoming aware of all that is the main tool so that we can move in the direction of behavior that takes into account that we're here to serve life. It isn't here to serve us. We enjoy the gift of life. Thank you for that. It's a whole different attitude than where I grew out of.
I wanted to give, before we close, I wanted to give Monica another opportunity to say any closing thoughts and that you would like to.
Okay, thank you. Just real quick, I there was a question that I saw that really spoke to me, which, I'm just speaking to the forest side of things. John's talking about much larger issues, but how are foresters, correcting the problems that have been created in the past by past forest management? And just real quick, people have recognized the damage that has been caused by the large scale, massive removal of forests, and there's different policies in place to preserve what's there, as well as approaches that people are trying to take to kind of recreate old growth structure, as well as trying to create a balance on the landscape of different types of forests. So I'll leave you with that.
Beth, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to just say that meditation goes by pretty quickly. It's pretty dense. I did upload it onto YouTube yesterday in case anyone would like to revisit it, and it should be on my website, if not already by tomorrow anyway. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John and Monica. That was fantastic. I see that there are a couple of questions that haven't gotten answered. So maybe what we'll do is share those with John and Monica, and they can respond to them. And maybe we can share those when we post the recording, because we did record this. So we can collect those and share those with John and Monica to maybe answer afterwards. But I just want to say a big thank you to our speakers, and thank you to Beth and the Overture Center. We have really enjoyed this partnership for the Earth Day at 50, the Arts Initiative in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. We're very excited we're sad that we won't be having the conference in person, but we're excited that we're still going to be offering some virtual talks on April 20th. So please watch our website and watch your email to learn more about how you can participate in the virtual Earth Day conference on April 20th. Beth posted several links in the comments in the chat box. So check those out. There's the Overture galleries where you can see John's work along with our website 50.nelson.wisc.edu and Monica's site as well. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And if you're looking for the recording, I'll work with Beth to get that posted in the coming weeks. So thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a good evening.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.